Hello, and welcome to The Fuse and the Flint, where technology, innovation, and development intersect in exciting ways. I'm Travis Frisinger, Technical Director of AI at 8th Light, here with Brendon Page, Delivery Manager from Chilisoft. In today's discussion, we're going to explore how to leverage AI offline. So, Brendon, I hear this started as a joke. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, first off, Travis, thanks for having me. Yes, it did start off as a joke, but maybe I would like to start with a bit of context on the story. So we are currently doing a project in a secure, regulated environment is how I'm allowed to describe it. And therefore, we have no internet access on our project PCs. And as with any project, the coding project, that is, when you're building something from scratch, there are some tedious tasks. And you have some options with tedious tasks, as per usual. You could try write some fancy code. You can try do some code generators. But we're trying to also manage complexity here. So we are leaving a project behind that the client developers have to take on. And there is sort of a complexity threshold we don't want to exceed. So we don't want to write fancy code, and we don't also want to necessarily leave behind code generators. So I was chatting to my boss the one day when I was saying, I think I really need to do something like this, but I want to approach it deliberately because, again, it's, taking on complexity is a deliberate action, in my opinion. And he sort of threw out a joke, one of those disposable jokes, the throwaway comments. They're like, why don't we get the AI to do it? Because we both know the situation we're in. There ain't no connection to Anthropic or what's the other one, OpenAI. So it didn't seem practical. And we both chuckled. And then immediately there was silence, like 2.5 seconds after the laughing. And we thought, hey, hold on a second. Because I had just recently been chatting to him about my dabbling in running local models on my laptop. I'm lucky enough to have a laptop with enough VRAM, and I'm not very good at creative writing. And I have a personal project that involves a little bit of creative writing. I'm just coding a little game, and I want some item descriptions. And I was trying to figure out, how can I do this without giving these companies any money? Because I don't know. I don't trust any of them, to be honest. I think I'm just training them. All my chats just help train them. That's my conspiracy theory. So I was being stubborn about it, and I found Olama, and I was quite surprised at the ease with which you can just host models on your laptop. I just have a laptop. Oh, okay, there's a bit of privilege there. It's a gaming laptop because I'm a gamer, and I think I've got 8 gigs of VRAM.
Your machine didn't have a lot of hardware, but you still managed to make it happen.
Yeah, a lot of hardware. Not having a lot of hardware is sort of one of those debatable things. It is a fairly beefy machine, but in terms of what you would need compared to 5 years ago, it's almost nothing. It's a stock standard, off-the-shelf gaming laptop. That's it. Yes.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So I was quite surprised. I was like, hey, I can run these models locally. And I was even more surprised because the models that are being put out now by Facebook, so the Meta model, and I think Mistral is the French startup, they have those lower parameter quantized ones, so 4-bit, 7 billion parameter models. And I couldn't believe how well they performed. Now, they don't perform well at everything, but if I compare just chatting to one of those models compared to chatting to GPT or, I don't know, pick any other one, there wasn't much difference. So I thought, wow, great. I can do this. I could use this in my game.
So when you say there wasn't much difference, it's kind of restricted to the type of activities you were doing. And I
was small context windows, and I was trying to get it to generate a reasonable amount of output, so not thousands upon thousands of lines. So I certainly, in my experimentation, I wasn't trying to ingest an entire code base or it basically go do some document retrieval and then put it into a big fat prompt or a big fat context into a prompt. I was controlling it quite precisely, at least for my personal project.
So you had a really constrained need, small scope, and It just worked for you in that scenario.
Yes, and it worked really well. And I was surprised because prior to that, I attempted to get something running, and I would have had to have learned how to set up a Python environment. There's all sorts of stuff. It's not my stack. Python is not my stack. So it was a whole nother world. So I was surprised at how accessible it was. That's the end of the story. In my personal project. So fast rewind back to the conversation with my boss. The reason why we both paused after thinking, ha ha ha, that's a ridiculous suggestion. And then I thought, hey, wait. I said to him, no, wait, maybe I could do the same thing that I've been doing for my personal project. And that's where it all started. That's where the joke and the context behind the joke. And that's how the joke led into me actually spending production time on, first off, just doing some experiments and coding or doing some prompt engineering to achieve that the code generation. Now, there was quite a bit of angst. I will have to just put this in there. I had to try to evaluate, am I just over-engineering? Am I overcomplicating? Am I trying to use the shiny thing? Because, and this, I actually had some sleepless nights over it because we have that in every developer who's passionate, is you want to try and explore the fancy, shiny thing that everybody's currently pointing at going, ooh, look. So for me, what ended up clinching it was there was a bit of fuzziness to the code generation. And the more I tried to do a POC for it using more traditional code generation, and the more I got into it, the more just edge cases I found. I was just like, oh no, I got to deal with that, and oh no, I got to deal with that, and oh no, I got to deal with that, and I just didn't want to.
When you say edge cases,
Yes.
are you talking technical edge cases? Are you talking limitations of the technology? Like what kind of, can you give us some,
Okay.
like what you were
Okay.
experiencing?
So I started to do some POCs because, again, I had the angst around just normal code generation. And I started to find situations. I can't share too many details because,
I understand.
NDAs,
I'm
but
try to
yes,
keep it
but
generic.
yeah, but so I started to experience some edge cases where I would have to do more complex code generation. I would have to understand types and type mapping because I was converting between different languages. Let's put it that way. And I was like, oh no. Now I have to, it's possible. I have to sit now, I have to code all the type mappings. And then you go, oh great, but what about the innumerable type mappings? And now it just keeps on going. And before I know it, I'm going to be doing a full visitor for an AST, and
So what you're saying is the shiny object started uncovering a lot more complexity than it was
yeah.
the value it might bring.
Well, actually, I mean, let's just be clear here. So there was I was hesitant about the shiny object, which was the AI, and then I thought, okay, well, I'm hesitant about just using AI because it's cool and I'd had success in my personal project. So I went down the traditional code generation route and did some POCs there. And that's where I was uncovering these edge cases. And it's just at an infinite rabbit hole of if anybody's done code generation before and you want to translate from one syntax to another syntax, you just end up having to basically pull out the spec and go, what's possible over here? And how does it map to over here? And it's a ton of work. I thought, okay, I can do it, but it's a ton of work. So I was quite glad I did that because my instinct was I had success in my personal project. Let me just jump straight in. I've got approval from my boss because he thought it was an interesting idea as well. But I put the brakes on it and thought, okay, let me do some POCs. Let's see how much it's going to cost. And it would have been the estimation was weeks, and I had multiple different types of code like generation I wanted to do, not just conversion from language A to language B. There was within the same language as well. I wanted to generate classes based off of source classes. So let's say you have a data model, and I wanted a test data builder, or at least a starting point for a test data builder. I could just see this code generation path, the traditional path, the non-AI path, just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And yes, I would have been speeding the team up, but I thought, okay, I've now evaluated it. I've sort of cured my angst. I know what that path looks like. There's less unknowns down there. And there's not I said fuzziness earlier. There isn't fuzziness, but there's just a lot of detail if you go down that path. So I thought, okay, it's deterministic, but again, you have to understand everything. So I thought, let's see if using AI if I can cut out some of that, the need for some of that complexity. I mean, after all, these things are word calculators, they're probabilistic. They do operate well in fuzzy scenarios.
So just to clarify here, making sure that I'm understanding,
Mm.
you tried to use traditional code generators, and that's where you bumped up on a lot of the kind of nuances of being able to do low-level language work. And that's when you turned to AI to see if it could assist you in kind of overcoming some of those gaps.
Exactly. Well, yes. I mean, I would say there wasn't a gap as in wouldn't work. There was just a lot of effort, and the path was clear. And I thought, okay, I can do this. But every time I write a new generator, I have to fully understand the source and destination. And it's not just a matter of doing a simple one, because of course these guys are writing a real system. They're writing a real system with real code, with real edge cases. So I will have to deal with those edge cases. Otherwise, the output it's just going to break, and it's going to stop generating, or it's just going to leave out something. And there's going to be a lack of trust anyhow, unless I put in massive effort. And that's actually, I'm glad my brain popped that word out, or that phrase out, lack of trust. I thought I'm not willing to put the effort in because it's not going to save enough time. And therefore, they're going to not trust it. They will have to review it anyhow. So why don't I try the tool which I know is going to hallucinate / output fuzzier results, because they're going to have to review it anyhow. And let's see how fast I can get that tool out using AI.
Oh, well, so really, you found a use case where AI can accelerate. So you're like, I'm still going to have issues. Let's just try and get this concept out as quickly as possible to validate if it's going to add value.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I was faced with a fork in the road, spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and potentially weeks every time I write a code generator. And I think we've ended with 10 or 15, somewhere around there, because people have added. So I've actually lost count. But I certainly got 10 out. So do I spend a whole bunch of time every single time and to make it super deterministic? Or do I invest less time and then it's super fuzzy and people have to code review it? And I didn't have weeks and weeks for each one. So I thought, well, if I don't have that time to make it super deterministic, and then let me see how much of the engineering work or cost of time is going to be on the AI side. Because if I can put in the same amount of effort or less, then perhaps it's better to go that route. It was a little bit of the, hey, there's the shiny thing, but there was sort of a deliberate choice to go that route, slowing down before I just dived into it.
I love the pragmatism that you've approached this with. You're like, okay, I have an issue. I understand the traditional ways of solving this. I'm familiar with some of the complexities. I mean, you're seasoned veteran of this industry, over 2 decades of experience. So you're like, okay, maybe this is one of those scenarios, kind of given all the constraints, where if I go after the shiny thing, I might actually be able to unlock some value. And
Yeah.
you had some experience there because of what you were experimenting with in your own time and kind of your own learning and growth. So you came in knowledgeable. It's not like you were just chasing a shiny object. You're like, I do think this may actually have utility for my problem. You were very, very pragmatic about how you approached this.
Yes. And look, it comes from skepticism. I've, as you said, 2 decades. I've lived through all the hype cycles. Not all of them. There were some before me, but I've lived through many hype cycles, from the first round of low code, no code to the second round of low code, no code hype cycles. So it's one of those lessons I've learned.
Yes, be pragmatic about this. Gather insights, but filter through your experience. So I wanted to touch on something interesting you said. You said you made 10, there might be 10 or 15 of these. What are these? Like how are you getting your team empowered to use this AI?
Okay, so let me sort of rewind slightly. I got a bit excited and continue the story. So we were talking quite a bit about my hardware and how it's more possible than it has been previously to run this, especially with the quantization down to, look, now you get 1.52 or 25 bits models, whatever. I went to work one day and I decided, device manager, let me go and see what graphics cards these things have. And because the client has purchased hardware for the longevity, they have purchased workstations. So they have workstation GPUs, which means they come with minimum 8 gigs of RAM in the newer models. And I thought, hey, 8 gigs of RAM. That's what my one has. Let's see if the NVIDIA CUDA drivers install on this. And they did, which was great. So I got some downloads into the offline network, set it up, and I started experimenting. And to answer your question, I didn't really know what I wanted to build. I just know I didn't know what they were going to get called. I knew the outcome. I needed to generate some code. So input, and then following a particular recipe / pattern as output. So I just started off by calling them recipes. And as I started to talk to people about them, we realized that they kind of are coding assistants, because they start off with a particular recipe or seeded chat, but they persist after that. They're unlike other standard code generators where you just generate the code, you get the output, you use it. This is a chat window. I built a little custom chat interface. So yes, I call these things recipes, and through some conversation, we landed on AI coding assistants, because you can ask it questions. It has a seeded chat. It's like a custom GPT, sort of. But it's more like a custom GPT on steroids, because with a custom GPT, you can set the system prompt, and then that's the custom GPT, right? So when you're working with the API, which Ollama has an API, you can control more. You can control temperature or model parameters, system prompt. You can seed the chat, because underlying all of these chats is a giant array of text. And I've had varying success with different techniques. I actually learned a whole bunch of stuff. But yes, long story short, they are called AI coding assistants. And I built in some really cool, interesting stuff and experimented with different techniques to effectively get the AI to do what I wanted.
So does each developer then have a version of this running on their machine that they can go interact with? All right. And is there there's a catalog of recipes they're able to pick from, and kind of based on the task that they need to achieve?
Yes. So it is a very simple interface. You boot it up. You have to have Ollama running locally. So yes, it's running on their machines, because they each have that GPU in them. There's a list of recipes, and then also the ability to start just plain unseeded, unconfigured, non-custom chats with the various models installed on their machines. So yeah.
They've got the ability to use these templates and still have a regular chat dialogue if they wanted to explore maybe a new recipe, for instance.
Yes, in fact, one of their favorite things is asking it to generate regex for finding types of code. Well, one of the guys at least, he will. I think he uses the Code Llama model to ask it to generate a regex that would match something, because he wants to find and replace something across many files, and coming up with a regex is just a disaster, time-consuming disaster.
So I love that, because you've empowered your team, and now they're finding their own use cases. Now that they've got access to this new utility, they're finding ways of kind of empowering themselves and streamlining their workflows.
Yes, and in fact, the entire project that I created is in the mono repo, and it's under DevTools, because we have a DevTools folder in the mono repo. So all the prompts are just text files that load up when the website loads up, so that the team is completely free, and have been doing it, where they have created their own prompts, committed them back to source, so they're available to the entire team. And even if it's just them using it, the rest of the team will, next time they fetch, see that new coding assistant and be able to make use of it. Yeah.
I really like this story of kind of just curiosity unlocking this empowerment of your team, and like just really showing the value, how that you went from skepticism to kind of unlocking value in a very unlikely scenario.
Yes. I mean, that's a great way to phrase it, because I was skeptical, but I'm always skeptical, because, as I said, I've been burnt quite a bit about it, and that's why I was trying it out personally. But I suppose that's one thing I would like to also say is what this has taught me is that it is just like big data and low code, no code, and all of the trends that have come along, like Docker and Swarm and Kubernetes and all the things. At the end of the day, they're tools. Right. And yes, the AIs are interesting, scary tools because they're very impressive, yet at the same time, incredibly stupid. I've learned that through this particular endeavor of mine. At the end of the day, they're a tool. And so the questions I've started asking myself is, how do they fit into my various stacks, my dev stack, my production stack? Because the barrier to entry to running them is incredibly low. If you realistically got a pair of 4090s or 4080s, 4090s with enough VRAM, you could even use it in a production scenario. You don't even need the fancy AI GPUs that NVIDIA makes. So as developers, we should be skeptical, but we should also understand that they're tools and we should understand what they're good at. And to do that, we should be playing around with them. As you said, you should be curious. At the end of the day, these are new tools moving at breakneck speed, and you better play around with them. Otherwise, you're not going to understand how to use them. If I had not played with these offline LLMs in my personal project, I would not have even thought to make the joke that spawned all of this.
I really love the fact that the genesis of this was a joke, was just kind of playing around like, oh, ha, ha, ha. Oh, wait, hold on. And then, from there, this whole journey's unfolded. So are there any other little nuances you want to talk about with regards to kind of like the tooling or developer workflow or?
Well, yes. My one thought is something I alluded to earlier, and that is whenever you're using one of these tools, you're sending your data, right? So I would just like to tell everybody, think about that. Are you sending personally identifiable information to Meta? Just think about how you approach these tools. That's my main message. Because to ask chat, you had to send proprietary intellectual property to somebody. You don't know where it's going. And that worries me a lot because the legal ramifications are rife. The ethical ramifications are rife. There's just so much that we don't know what's going on. I think being deliberate about your approach to it, understanding the tools, understanding how they work. I was shocked that if you interact with these things through an API, it's an array of strings. System said this, user said this. And every time it's just the array of strings going back and forward. Now, sure, they have caching layers and everything so that they don't send the full chat if you're using one of the online chats. But at the end of the day, that's what goes into the machine. That's what goes into the model, and that's what comes out. I didn't even imagine. I thought it would have been way more sophisticated. So diving into it gave me a deeper appreciation and a better understanding of what it is and what it can do.
That's awesome. And I often think about this. A transistor is what makes up a computer, right? A real simple on-off. And yet look at the complexity that it's unlocked.
Yeah.
So there's a whole nother narrative there, meta-narrative about cellular autonoma and complex systems and emergence that we'll save for another time. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your story about how to utilize AI offline.
Thanks, Trav. It was great being here, and it's always wonderful chatting with you.
It always is. It always is. Thanks for listening. I want to invite everyone to check out our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn. You can always subscribe to stay updated on our latest episodes and visit us at 8thlight.com for more information. Till next time.